August 22 of this year, United States of America, Charlotte City. 23-year-old Iryna Zarutska is returning home. She worked at a pizzeria and was returning after her shift. At 9:46 post-meridium, she gets on a light rail train, takes a free seat, and calmly looks at her phone. She doesn't pay attention to the man sitting behind her, and really, why should she? Who could have known that this was Dekarlos Jr., a mentally ill repeat offender who, in just a few minutes, would pull out a knife and end Iryna's life? In front of everyone who was in that train car. That's what we'll talk about today. I'll tell you everything that's known at this point. Who Iryna was, who her killer is, and maybe, for a short time, still is. I'll say right away, this isn't the kind of video that will make you smile, not for any reason. Watch the last 4 videos for a smile. Now let's focus on this case. Ira moved to the United States with her mother, sister, and brother in August 2022, settling in Charlotte. The girl adapted pretty quickly. She started taking English courses and enrolled in a community college. She wanted to be a veterinary assistant. In general, they say she really loved animals, and she was often seen walking the neighbors' dogs. Later, she got a job at a local pizzeria. She and her boyfriend Stas rented their own apartment in the North Davidson Art Quarter. The choice of the neighborhood was probably not accidental, since Ira was a creative person. She was passionate about drawing, creating sculptures, and eclectic clothing. On August 22, after her pizzeria shift, she planned to go home to her beloved, who awaited her. She even texted him something like, "I'll be home soon," but time passed and she never showed up. Of course, her loved ones started to worry. They checked Iryna's phone location. That's when they saw that it was at the train station, so they headed there. And right there at the scene, they found out that Iryna had been cold-bloodedly murdered. This happened about 4 minutes after Iryna got on the tram. All of this was caught on surveillance camera. I think you've seen this footage. The image is spread all over the world. The video shows the girl, clearly fascinated, walking to the transport and taking a seat. Her future killer sits quietly behind her. Everyone rides in calm silence. She spoke to no one. She was just on her phone. And in a few minutes, this guy who was sitting behind her pulls out a knife and starts stabbing her. What were the other passengers doing? Nothing. They just looked around and stayed seated. That's it. I understand it can be scary and frightening that attackers might target them. You never really know how it could all turn out, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Right now, I'll say that it's just very sad, unfair, and honestly a total mess. The man who attacked Iru calmly paced back and forth through the train car for a while. He was holding the same knife he used to stab Iru. Blood was dripping from it right onto the floor. Then he took off his outer clothing and left the vehicle. This was about 2 minutes after the crime. After the killer left, the witnesses contacted the KEC representatives. Maybe I'm saying it wrong. It's spelled this way and means this. In short, these KEC ensure the safety of passengers and staff in the city's public transport. But you see, at that moment, they weren't in the carriage. Well, I mean in the one where Ira and her killer were. They were somewhere else in another part of the train, of the light rail tram, I mean. The cops arrived at the scene pretty quickly, just 6 minutes after the crime. They pronounced Iryna Zarutska dead. Soon after, the suspect, Dekarlos Jr., was also arrested. By the way, the killer was first taken to the hospital. During the attack, he injured his hand and was then transferred to the county jail. It soon turned out that this guy had no right to be in that train car at all. That is, he didn't have a ticket. And a little later, during the investigation, it turned out that he shouldn't have even been free. But he was. Dekarlos Jr., homeless, unemployed, but with a big criminal background. Between 2011 and 2025, he was arrested 14 times. Among the charges were disorderly conduct, theft, and even domestic violence. But despite such a rather serious list, he managed to avoid punishment every time. Well, almost every time. That's at least a fair punishment. If someone's arrested 14 times, that's more than just petty hooliganism, got drunk, made a mistake. Sometimes they let you go once. This guy was arrested 14 times. Maybe they should have thought that it's not worth letting someone go 14 times. Dekarlos started his criminal career with minor offenses. But when it came to court, he just skipped the hearings. All of them. That should have been grounds for a more serious punishment. But the guy was only sentenced to probation. So basically nothing. Impunity is a monster's best friend for rapists, murderers, and others. Well, in short, Dekarlos didn't even finish his probation and already committed a new crime. It was an armed robbery. He stole a man's phone and money on the street and was sent to jail this time. But he didn't serve as much time as he was supposed to. They released him on parole after 5 years. In 2020, that same year, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which we'll talk about a bit later as well. That's why, specifically regarding whether this is grounds to declare the man legally insane. According to the man's relatives, they had noticed for quite some time that something was wrong with him in terms of his mental health. But after he left prison, things got much worse. I think things got worse while he was in prison, not after he got out. They say things got worse right after he got out. Here's a quote from his sister.
When he came back home, he was nothing like the brother I remembered. It seemed like he wasn't in our reality. He looked very distant, and his condition kept getting worse. From time to time, he would mention some kind of microchip and ask, "Do you see it too?" He would suddenly stop talking and stare into space, believing either his mother or I were involved in his situation.
Around the same time, the man underwent a medical examination and was prescribed medication. But he said, you know what, no, those pills aren't for me, I'm not going to take them. And in fact, he didn't take them. Then his mental state only got worse. He became more aggressive. Sometimes he would walk around talking to himself, and sometimes he would yell at someone or at no one in particular. Michelle, the man's mother, said she noticed her son's condition and asked doctors to involuntarily hospitalize him so that he would be treated because according to her, he was behaving very inappropriately. But according to her, again, she was refused. One way or another, just a year after Dekarlos was released from prison, he was arrested again. This time he attacked his own sister. How could that happen? Well, after his release, he lived with her for a while, and she says that he, let's put it this way, didn't keep his room tidy at all, or the apartment in general. And one day she asked him, saying, "Brother, could you please clean up your room better, where you live?" To which he started getting aggressive and eventually attacked her and bit her. The outraged sister asked her brother to leave, but of course he didn't want to. However, she somehow managed to push him out of the apartment and even lock the door. But that didn't stop him. He just broke down the door, can you imagine, and got back into the apartment. That's when my sister went to the cops, filed a report, and her brother was detained. But shortly after, she withdrew the report. After all, she said she felt uncomfortable suing her own brother. Eventually, the case was closed, and Dekarlos, well, was free. In April and May of 2024, Dekarlos was detained twice for abusing the 911 system. He faced similar charges again in January 2025. At that time, he was detained because he kept calling 911 and saying, "Guys, I have some kind of chip implanted in my head and it's supposedly controlling my actions." The 911 dispatcher said, "Well, that's not our responsibility. You need to talk to the medical professionals. We're not involved here." Carlos wasn't satisfied with those answers, so he kept calling 911, and that's exactly why he was arrested. At this point in the story, a woman named Teresa Stokes appears. At the moment, she is indirectly being blamed for what happened to Iryna. She was the judge who handled the case of Dekarlos regarding abuse of the 911 system. Instead of convicting or ordering mandatory treatment for the man, she basically ignored his previous charges and arrests altogether. Basically, she just let him go, saying, well, okay, you abused 911, now go home. So, Dekarlos was released after he signed a promise to appear at the next hearing. And just 7 months later, he killed Iryna Zarutska. The first to draw attention to Mrs. Stokes' actions was Iryna's boyfriend on his Instagram. In short, according to the information he has, this judge, Mrs. Stokes, didn't even finish law school. Can you believe it? She's already a judge. When the details of this case became public, the local Republicans there in North Carolina started demanding that the woman be removed from her position. Quote,
"The justice system of North Carolina failed Iryna Zarutska. She came to Charlotte in search of safety and a better life. But instead, she was brutally murdered by a repeat offender who should never have been released. By releasing him on just a written promise, Stokes demonstrated a willful neglect of professional duties and committed actions that harm justice. We also urge the court to conduct a thorough review of her previous bail decisions to assess the full extent of her misconduct."
But the case only gained public attention 2 weeks after everything actually happened. That's when the surveillance camera footage was made public. The footage quickly went viral. It's really hard not to notice it. It's creepy, it's horrible. Well, that's how I found out about this case myself. I was just scrolling through TikTok and saw a story about the murder of Ukrainian women in the United States. Overall, opinions about the case are mixed, let's put it that way. For example, some people said that the prolonged silence from the media about the case might be related to racial stereotypes. Like the victim is white and the attacker is black, and that's what affected how quickly the news was reported. I want to emphasize here that I'm not a racist, not a homophobe, don't attribute anything like that to me. But if the question is, in my view, it's still subjective, technical, and superficial. Let's model a similar situation in the train car. As we can see, almost everyone there is black, or even, if I'm not mistaken, everyone is black, the killer is black, and there's one white girl sitting there, and she's the victim. So, let's imagine a situation where everyone in the train car is white, and the attacker is a white man, and he kills one innocent black girl. The witnesses react the same way. No one rushes to help or does anything immediately. The judge, who previously released this repeat offender who has now killed this black girl, is also white, whether male or female. So if there were such a situation, wouldn't there be a bunch of headlines saying that this is a racially motivated murder? On racial grounds. But in this case with Iryna, could it be that basically they kept quiet about it, didn't give the case any publicity because of this? Not because he's racist, but because he's black, and in today's tolerant West, it's unacceptable to say a black man killed a white girl for no reason. Maybe, I don't know. I don't live in the States, and this culture feels distant. I only know it from movies and television. But again, subjectively, I'm almost certain that if the victim had been a black girl and everyone around her was white, it would have spread instantly, on the same day, all over the States, Mexico, Canada, wherever it could reach, everywhere. Once again, for the record, because now they'll block the channel for some kind of racism, I'm not a racist. On the contrary, I think it absolutely doesn't matter. The question of skin color doesn't matter at all when it comes to who you are as a person and, well, the question of your actions. There are simply wonderful good people, and there are terrible monsters. That's all. However, in my opinion, there's something to think about here. You can discuss or judge in the comments. In addition, people criticize the inaction of the witnesses in the train car, who could have intervened or at least called emergency services sooner. The witnesses' behavior drew significant attention and sparked discussions on social media and among psychologists and sociologists. Some of them explain what happened as a kind of bystander effect. It's like when the presence of other people during an emergency, a terrible or tragic situation, reduces the likelihood that someone will dare to intervene. Like, people might have felt fear for their own safety, doubted their own actions, or expected that someone else had already called for help. In addition, psychologists note that the shock and suddenness of violence in a public place can cause stupor, a temporary freezing of reaction when a person is unable to act appropriately. Well, again, I would like to say that I would have immediately rushed to help the girl in that situation, thrown everyone around, saved their lives, and so on. But to be honest with you, I don't know how I would have acted because I've never been in a similar situation. I want to believe I would, but I won't claim to be a hero since I don't know. I've never been in that situation, so I won't judge. If it happens so suddenly, like you're just sitting there on your phone and then bam, someone is already being attacked. Would I be able to react instantly and understand what needs to be done and so on? I don't know. I just don't know. I hope I could. Besides that, a significant amount of criticism was directed at the mayor of Charlotte, Viola Lyles. In her initial statement, she emphasized Dekarlos Brown's mental health issues several times and barely mentioned Iryna herself. Again, it's interesting why. The media spoke with Dekarlos' sister, and she said that her brother called her and said he killed Iryna because some foreign material was placed in his brain, and it was controlling his actions. This material was placed by the government. Next is a quote from Dekarlos Jr.
I was going downtown to the hospital to tell them that I'm trying to get rid of this material to stop going crazy. I didn't even know this woman. I didn't say a single word to her. It's really scary. Why would someone stab another person for no reason? The ones who put this material in me are to blame. They are. Now it's necessary to investigate why my body was affected like this. It's necessary to conduct an investigation to find out what really happened.
But literally just a few days later, when his sister came to visit him in prison, he told her something completely different. He said he killed Iryna because it seemed to him that she was reading his thoughts. The chip, at this point, had nothing to do with it. On September 9, 2025, the United States Department of Justice charged Dekarlos Brown with first-degree murder. In addition, he was charged with murder in the public transportation system. Each of these charges carries the death penalty as punishment. If he is found guilty, it will be either life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or the death penalty. The court hearing is scheduled for September this year. That means it's coming up soon. In case you're wondering how someone can be diagnosed with schizophrenia and still be considered sane, again, at least in the United States, having a diagnosis does not equal insanity. Something else is more important here. The key is whether the person understood their actions and could control them at the time of the crime. So, accordingly, if during the investigation the court proves that at the moment of the murder, Carlos could control his actions and understood what he was doing, then he will be considered sane. If they prove he couldn't, he'll be considered insane. That's how it works. According to media reports, for Ira's relatives, imprisoning the killer is now the top priority. But besides that, they also pay attention to public safety. The family is demanding a thorough investigation into the circumstances of Ira's murder. They also request special focus on violations in public transportation and safety. Quote,
"Anyone could have been on that transport that night. We are committed to ensuring this never happens again."
Work in this direction is already underway. Charlotte Mayor Viola Lyles announced that immediate changes need to be made to the security system. Increase the number of fare inspections, install new validators, and expand the security staff on trains and platforms. Also involve police officers who will patrol public transportation. At the same time, Iryna's family was dealing with more painful and personal issues, namely Iryna's burial and saying goodbye to her. In their memory, she will always remain gifted. A strong, bright, cheerful, and kind person. The pizzeria where Iryna worked in Charlotte also honored her memory.
We lost an incredible employee and true friend. Our dear Iryna left this world too soon, and our hearts are filled with grief.
The family chose to bury Iryna in the United States. And that's when information started spreading that the father of the deceased, who is in Ukraine, is not being allowed to leave Ukraine. Well, you can guess why, but apparently they let him go. Our border guards, at least according to the statement published earlier by the Daily Mail, denied this.
All these reports and comments that were spread by various information sources, including those citing foreign media, are not true and are absurd. The girl's father wasn't stopped at checkpoints and didn't go through border crossing procedures to leave Ukraine. I can also note that he received the needed assistance with departure documents, monitoring in Ukraine, and other necessary help. And now I can state that recently he left Ukraine on the basis of humanitarian circumstances. He is receiving consular help and has arrived in the United States, where he can say goodbye to his
daughter. No matter what, it's hard to say goodbye to a child who was killed. Well, everyone deserves it, everyone who lives in our Ukraine, even 2,360 Ohm. I wonder if they would have let him out without the publicity about his release. That's something to consider. Across various United States, memorial services were held for all who wished to honor Iryna. Entrepreneurs from large and small businesses funded murals across the United States to honor the late Iryna Zarutska. Just a few days ago, a memory swept through. Rapper DaBaby released a music video for the song Save Me. In it, he essentially recreates the video recording of the moment of Iryna's murder. But at the last moment, Dekarlos' hand is stopped. That's how it is, dear ones. I don't even know what to say. That's the video for today. I wish Ira's family strength to endure all of this. To the viewers, as always, I wish you to stay safe, take care of yourselves, your family, and your loved ones. And of course, I wish you good health. That's all. See you in the next video. If you want to relax a bit right now, watch one of the previous videos, maybe number 3 or 4. The atmosphere there is much more cheerful. That's all for today.